Forgive me for not being so active in my internet activities, but I have been doing nothing but isolating myself thanks to current events and being the most unproductive sloth that you can think of. When people are talking about whatever the latest hooplas are going on today, I've been catching up with the Trails cinematic universe. Wait a second, what? There's a cinematic universe other than Marvel? Well, yes there is, but we're not even counting DC at this point, are we? But regardless, the Trails cinematic universe is the cinematic universe from Neon Falcon, consisting of a lot of JRPGs that I've spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours upon, filled with the most ambitious, vast, expansive, well-realized, and ridiculously intriguing fictional narratives and universe to have ever been developed by mankind. The cinematic universe has been on for so long that it already has two major crossover events. Trails of Cold Steel 3 is basically the Infinity War to the Trails Saga, and Cold Steel 4, which is not out yet for the international release, is basically the endgame. And we haven't even gone into Hajimari no Kiseki, which is even more continuation of the saga. This cinematic universe has gone under a lot of people's radar thanks to big mainstream JRPG releases like Persona and Final Fantasy, but instead of playing those titles again and be disappointed by the fact that they either didn't change much or they changed so much they ruined the entire thing, I'm just gonna play some good old Trails. I've been doing everything that I can to catch up with everything this universe has to offer because I absolutely love it. I love it so much that I haven't been making videos in the past few weeks just because there's a lot of drama happening going on, but it's also because I'm getting so caught on with this franchise and it's too freaking awesome. So I'm gonna talk about why this franchise is awesome and to fill in the empty void that is this channel. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Trails cinematic universe, or the Trails Saga. That's a lot simpler to say. The Trails Saga consists of several video games. The first three games are the Trails in the Sky trilogy released in the 2000s for the PC actually. The art style does look like something that came out of the 2000s. The games do have an Evo version, which is basically a remaster of the games with updated art style, exclusive on PS Vita and never localized because of course they don't. The PC version of the game is the original version, but if you prefer the art style of the Evo version, the soundtrack of the Evo, and the Japanese voices as well, there is a mod to fix that. I'll link to it down below. And yes, the Trails in the Sky games are out on PC for a while now, and you can play them on pretty much a potato these days. So if you only have like a cheap notebook as your PC, you can buy these games on Steam or Good Old Games and enjoy the cinematic experience while you save up for a better PC to play the Cold Steel games later on. They do have prettier graphics and therefore you're gonna need a beefier system, either that or a PS4 because all the Cold Steel games are on the PS4. Anyway, Trails in the Sky follows the story of Estelle, a young junior bracer who is on the lookout for her missing father with her adoptive brother and obvious love interest Joshua. And don't worry, that is not the first time Trails tried to sail a brother and sister relationship that isn't blood related. It's one of the few rare instances of a JRPG with a female protagonist that isn't Neptunia or Atelier or Valkyrie Profile or Fire Emblem or Final Fantasy. Okay, it's one of the many JRPGs with a female protagonist. The Trails in the Sky trilogy is what we generally refer to as the Liberl Arc because the three games mostly take place in the Liberl Kingdom and it covers the history of what happens in well, Liberl. The Liberl Arc is an amazing trilogy that you absolutely should play, and it's the most definitive starting point of the entire Trails Saga. The story is brilliant, the characters are brilliant, the writing is fantastic, it's funny, heartwarming, but also feels very real as well. If you want to jump into the Trails Saga, the Liberl Arc games are without a doubt the most recommended starting point of the entire series. It's also a very good love story too. Both Estelle and Joshua are incredibly good and have excellent chemistry and character arcs throughout the series. It's an incredibly wonderful story of redemption, but it's taken from a third-person perspective, namely Estelle's perspective towards Joshua's redemption and how everyone deserves a chance to be happy and feel happy. Easily one of the best love stories in video games. But with that being said, Chloe is still best waifu. The next two games are what we refer to as the Crossbell Arc. They consist of two games, Zero no Kiseki or Trails to Zero, and Ao no Kiseki or Trails to Azure. I mentioned their Japanese names because these two games have never been translated into English, or at least officially, and they should because the characters from these two games are incredibly significant in the next few Cold Steel games. There are two ways for you to play the game. You can play the game by downloading the English patch PSP ISOs and play it through a PSP emulator, which also doesn't require a demanding hardware. You can even run it on your phone if you have a semi-decent one that can play games. You can also play them on PC, but again, they're not officially translated yet and you can't find them through your normal digital distribution stores. Thankfully, the fans of these games are very cool and they too translated the PC version of these two games. There is a fan translation project for the PC version of Zero from a group named Geofront. It was actually only recently published. The Azure PC version, on the other hand, merely imported the PSP translation and they require you to change the entire system locale to Japanese. Both versions support safe imports, so pick your poison. I personally played the PSP version. It's much easier for me to deal with. I can play them when I'm on the go, which is not always because recent events, and they're pretty much translated enough for you to understand the story. Either way, good job, fans. You guys rock. Anyway, the Crossbell Arc follows the story of Lloyd Bannings, an up-and-coming detective who is assigned to a brand new section of the police department in Crossbell named the Special Support Section, alongside other characters that are weirdly not from the police. Together, they're gonna perform basically the same task as the Bracers do, except under the police jurisdiction. What follows is two of the most compelling and intriguing stories that I've ever played in any video game. The Crossbell Arc is not exactly a direct sequel to the Liberl Arc. While it does feature an entirely different cast, characters from the Liberl Arc are definitely there, and some character arcs that are straight up unfinished in the Liberl Arc are continued even further on the Crossbell Arc. That being said, you don't really have to play the Liberl Arc to enjoy the Crossbell Arc. I didn't, and I still think they're amazing games. In fact, my order of play is rather jumbled, and even then, I still love the universe and the characters and all of that. I've never been truly intrigued by any sorts of political discussions, and by that I mean real politics discussed by politicians. I thought they're really freaking boring. But Trails to Azure, the Crossbell Arc's second game, provides one of the most intriguing political meetings that I've ever been through in any video game ever. There's a scene where significant political figures from every continent gather up. Imagine the trade deals in Star Wars prequels, except you know the politicians involved, you know the characters involved, and it's just a lot better in general. I got so invested with the universe that I'm practically begging the game to let me listen to what they're discussing. Let me hear about the suggestions that each continent talks about regarding the trade deals. Let me hear their solutions and how to deal with Crossbell's incredibly flawed security or its current state as an orphan city, practically. This game makes me intrigued of its politics, and it's very rare for video games to do that to me. The meeting is straight up one of the best moments in the entire Trails Saga. Azure in general provides some of the best moments in the Trails Saga. The introduction to chapter 4 is wow, it's the definition of 0 to a million. If you haven't played the Crossbell Arc games, play them. They're definitely worth your time. And before we get to the main meat of the Trails games, there's also one more Trails game that is worth mentioning called Nayuta no Kiseki, or Nayuta Endless Trails. This is a completely different game that takes place in an entirely new universe and is totally unrelated to the aforementioned Trails Saga. So this is a game reserved for the true enthusiasts of the Trails fans who don't really have a lot of other Trails games to play. You might want to check out this one if you have some time, but do keep in mind that it's a very different game. It's an action RPG instead of a turn-based RPG. Now let's get into the real meat of the Trails Saga. What is, in my opinion, the heart of the entire Trails Saga is the Cold Steel series, also known as the Erebonia Arc. It's the most popular and most easily accessible series out of all of the games. In my old videos, I've talked about how much I love Cold Steel 1 and 2, and how I thought that those two games are some of my favorite games of all time. It's filled with amazing characters, intriguing stories, and an incredibly vast and well-realized universe. universe. The Cold Steel series represents the absolute best that the Trails Saga can offer, and since they're my first entry to the Trails series, let me describe to you why I absolutely love them. When I come to Cold Steel 1, I didn't really expect much of it. I thought it looked like a Persona clone. It's a turn-based JRPG with high school characters in a sci-fi fantasy universe. I don't exactly know how to describe the Trails universe. It's a really weird mix of modern technologies with old technologies. Characters still use swords and spears and all of that, but some of them also use guns and grenades. That weird combination alone makes me intrigued on this sci-fi fantasy universe, or should I say it's orb punk, because everything is based on orbital technologies. Well, almost everything. But oh boy, my amazement doesn't stop on just the universe. The game as a whole is freaking amazing. I'd even dare to say that they're better than Persona. And it's on PC. You play as Reed Schwarzer, just your typical average JRPG protagonist who recently joined Thor's military academy, but the game puts you amongst a group of other students in Class 7. These are students who are specifically chosen regardless of their nobility status, and they're tasked to perform field studies around Erebonia. So why do I love Cold Steel 1 and 2 specifically? It's simply because they complement each other so well. The first game is basically a museum tour for Erebonia, and it's a really good museum tour. The game slowly introduces one part of the region to another. Every chapter has pretty much the same premise. The students of Class 7 will be sent for a field study, except they explore a different part of Erebonia in every chapter, and there will be different story bits that complement it. But every single place has their own unique design and purpose. Every place has their own significance towards the characters. It's a museum tour that makes you want to know more about the area and the characters who are involved in it. The second game, on the other hand, is the absolute full package of the experience. Without spoiling too much, there's a big civil war happening, and you get access to a ship that allows you to travel from any place in Erebonia that you visited in the previous game. The first game is meant to familiarize you with the areas so that you can feel the emotional impact when they decided to destroy them in the second game. And yes, there's quite a lot of that, and it's really not pretty. Not only that, but you can also recruit other students through completing their side quests and arming your troops for a big event in the last one. The game basically turns into Mass Effect 3, except it actually ends in a bittersweet note that leads more into the sweet. And now let's talk about the characters. These are some really funny, memorable, and interesting characters that have their own issues and struggles to get through. These characters have a noticeable quirk on their surface level, but they do develop as you get through them, and you get to know their likes, their dislikes, their habits, etc. You can even get to know characters that are not in your class. They too have their own side quests and struggles to deal with. One of the game's collectibles is character profiles, and collecting them will reveal interesting character stories and unlock achievements if you're into that sort of thing. And just like Persona, it is absolutely possible for you to develop a bond with these characters, to the point of even romancing them. But unlike Persona, it is impossible to get max socialing for everyone in a single playthrough unless you're a complete scrub like me and use a trainer to bump up those bonding points. I love the characters in the game. It's not just the Erebonia Arc characters, but also the Liberl Arc and the Crossbell Arc characters. They're all amazing. I can relate with a lot of their issues and struggles. I laugh with them, I cried with them, I have intimate moments with them. What makes this universe feel so special is that this is a JRPG saga, a JRPG cinematic universe where the stories continue from one game to the next. There's nothing much to say about the Trails Saga without going into spoilers at this point. If you don't have a lot of games to play in this time of isolation, you can choose to play Persona 5 Royale and the Final Fantasy VII Remake and all of that, but I implore you to please give the Trails Saga a try. They did occupy my boredom. I mean, I haven't made videos of anything in a while because I've been playing nothing but Trails. I absolutely love the Trails Saga, and I cannot wait for its eventual endgame next year, on PC at least. Now, as much as I love these games, I do realize that the Trails Saga is one of those games that require a lot of dedication to get into. I mean, there are 9 freaking games. 9 JRPGs are gonna take a long time, and we're not even counting Nayuta. For me, the best recommendation is obviously playing it chronologically. But that being said, Cold Steel 1 1 and 2 can also be played by themselves. If you think the older Trails games are a little bit more difficult to get into, there's nothing wrong with playing Cold Steel first. While these two games take place in the same continuity, they mostly don't involve the characters from Crossbell and the Liberl arc that much. That being said, I highly, and I mean highly recommend to not play Cold Steel 3 before you play the Crossbell arc games and the Liberl arc games. Play those games first before you hop into the big Avengers event that is Cold Steel 3 and 4. If you want my order recommendation, it doesn't really matter as long as you leave Cold Steel 3 and 4 the absolute last. Phew, that's quite exhausting. Thank you so much for joining me into this journey. If you want to support this channel, you can do so by checking the links down below. Huge thanks to Zero Artism and Joseph for the pledges. You guys are fantastic. I'll see you all in the next one.